Warning, F-bombs are armed and may be dropped. 5-minute warning, but I always try to start 5 minutes early anyways. Um, wow, are we going to have a day? This whole is always bullshit. I'll let a couple of people get in here while I scroll the screen up so that I can read the rest of the notes. All right. Hey there, troll. I saw that comment earlier, even though it's rolled off the screen. Oh my god. And of course it was inevitable. One way or the other, it was inevitable. Who are we kidding? All right. I still got 4 minutes. So I'm going to go over the subjects just briefly so that the future viewers can get an idea. First, I'm going to go over the Chauvin verdict and the riots that were inevitable. Universal time. What is it and what does it mean? ATF's 80% ban proposals. Right now, it looks like there's only one, but let's see what happens. Saadiq TEAGUE, that's the boy that was arrested in the New York subway for carrying what's been described as an AK-47. I'm withholding statement. And then I'm going to close up with Title III definitions. When I do that, I'm just going to be going over the basics of the definitions, and then next week I'm going to go over the definitions in greater detail. Still not time, which is always annoying. The worst part is always the waiting. I want to apologize to the viewers who were here last week. YouTube's claim is that the stream was shut down for displaying firearms during the live stream. Well, that's bullshit. And I was able to point out a leftist who has, at least on 2 occasions, displayed the exact same kind of weapons, was not shut down, and has made very violent statements regarding his use of those weapons. All right, so it's a bullshit argument. We all knew it. Now we can kind of prove it. But that's their story, and they're sticking to it. And whatever. That's fine. Okay, still 2 minutes. I hope you all got your coffee, tea, Gatorade, or whatever else you need ready. Because you know, if you smoke on a live stream, they'll shut it down too. Unless, of course, you're a leftist, in which case it's perfectly fine. Whatever. That's fine. I get it. 2 sets of rules. Fact of the matter is, I'm kind of lucky it didn't happen before. I'm also very lucky they haven't just shut the channel down out of pure spite. All right. Troll says he's cooking right now. And I really hate you because that actually looks good, and I have a problem with remembering to eat sometimes. Papa Carrie is constantly on me about that. But moving on. Okay, it is now time, and I am now. First subject is the inevitable riots that have already started, with the Chauvin verdict coming down. I've heard it argued that the riots would have been worse if he'd been found not guilty. No, 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 no. It has nothing to do with his guilt, his innocence, his something else. Right? It has everything to do with an excuse to riot. That's it. That's the truth. You don't have to like it. That is the way it is. This summer is already scheduled to be long and hot. Is something that scares every cop for, well, since the Romans, right? The heat makes people crazy. The dry makes them crazy. Humidity makes them crazy. But you know what? What really causes the most trouble is just that heat. If you've ever been to Los Angeles, you know they worry about the Santa Ana winds because it's hot, dry air with lots of dust. It comes in and makes everybody just absolutely insane. It's going to be worse this year because there's going to be dust in the air that Mother Nature didn't actually put there. Right? I don't want to, obviously, I don't want to write Iran's uh, war plan for them, but we saw it happening up in Oregon last summer. But let's set aside the question of which side did it. It still happened. There's still an arrest, a very real arrest out of that shitstorm, and it was being used as a weapon. And that's as simple as what it is. This time they're going to learn from the mistakes. And I want to emphasize in the plural. There's at least two that I've seen so far. And it's going to be that much worse. And it's not going to be just distractionary or to make people uh, focus on the wrong things. This time they're going to be used as a weapon. All right. And that's just the way it is. We're looking at probably about 20 cities, uh, quarter of a million people. 20 cities burned to the ground and a quarter million people displaced. Yeah. And amidst all this, I'm actually kind of curious. Are they going to try a new COVID outbreak before just to slow everything down to begin with, or are they going to do it in the middle using the chaos that's then existing to spread it that much faster? Good question. I don't know. It's an open secret that I think COVID was and was intended to be a biological weapon. So, what difference would that really make? Oh, my computer is warning me that I forgot to reset the router. So, if I go away, folks, I'm sorry. Either way, let's move on. Because, I got in trouble for this last week, even though others do it all the time. Oh, yeah, well, whatever. Um, so yeah, I don't want to write their playbook for them or their war plan for them, but if you are anywhere from basically San Diego north to Seattle, east to Dallas, or northeast to the U.S. Canadian border, you need to be ready for this summer. You need to be ready for the summer. You need to be ready for wildfires. They're going to be very, very bad. And some of them may get chalked up later to natural causes, but no, they're not. I'm going to go one step further and say I think they're going to start in Arizona. I know a little bit about the history of Arizona wildfires. There's some very interesting details about how those wildfires break out that will get attention. Excuse me a moment. Let's turn the ringer on my phone off. Where was I? Oh, yes. I think they're going to start in Arizona, so be watching for that. All right. The riots themselves. Um, Excuse me a moment. This is important. Yeah. The good news is that that was good news. The bad news is it was bad timing. Papa Carey's going back into the hospital for follow-up procedure. He forgot what time this starts because he's in a different time zone. So he called at his 9 or 8. Try not to hold it against him. Where was I? Oh, the riots are going to start. They're going to look small and simple. Um, Protests, uh, marches, that sort of thing. Now, many of them will actually end that way. All right, and that's the truth. Of them will actually end that way. I do not believe most of them will. I believe most of them will end up in rocks and bricks and eventually guns. Keep your ear to that ground really, really hard. If you hear that there's going to be a protest or a march or a whatever in your town, avoid it like a plague. The nearest town to me is Reno. I can plan my trip around where the riots are going to be. In fact, I normally do. They're normally down in this generally one area or the other. I don't have to go into those areas to get to work. I don't care. And yes, I have to drive an extra 30 minutes to get to work because I could be living like 6 blocks from work. But I'd be right in the middle of those protest areas. Where I am actually being paid to live there, but worse still, I can avoid the trouble areas. It's really easy. I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to think about it. Okay. Stay away from the protests. I'm going to add to this. Even if your heart is in that protest, you don't want to die, you don't want to be raped, you don't want to be in the hospital for 6 months, stay away. Just stay out of it. It's not safe for you to go there. And have a get home bag. Even if you don't do it with the ulterior motives that I've discussed, have a get home bag. You don't know when you're going to be caught on the wrong side of a natural disaster, for that matter. Um, when the Zog fire broke out, I was actually in Reading. I was down in town with Papa Carey when we get a phone call. Hey, there's a fire out past, uh, actually, between where Papa Carey lives and town, between Papa Carey's place and Reading proper. We were very lucky that there was a second route in that bypassed the fire zone. They would not have let us actually turn left or right to get into town from the bypass point. Well, we were able to turn left and go to Dad's place, and we hunkered down there for about, I remember it was 36 solid hours. Welcome back, Alpine. um, so yeah, if we hadn't have been able to get home that route, we would have been stuck because I didn't have this. I wouldn't have been able to go on the off-road routes to go around. I would have, but it would have taken me at least 72 hours to march. No food, no water, no nothing. 72 hours, not going to happen. Have a get home bag. All right. Belabored that part enough. When you hear that these protests are going to start, go home. Uh, close your windows, your drapes. Put bookshelves at bare minimum. Put bookshelves with filled with books or whatever you can in front of your front windows. Put a couch behind that to help hold it in place. Put your dining room table in front of the door. Do whatever you can. Close up and do not open even for the cops or firefighters unless your house is on fire. Your house is currently on fire. And then just get out as best you can because that's about the way it's going to go. I'm sorry, but that is the reality. There is a possibility, infinitely small, that as one of these wildfires aims towards fill in the blank city, the city cuts off residential water. Um, that's a possibility. Hopefully, it won't come to pass. But as a hedge against that, have about 20 gallons of drinking water. Have it rotated out once a week and accept that it is what it is. Okay, I'm going to catch up on chat real quick. Okay. Uh, it's mostly just Troll and Gulch saying hi to each other. Alpine, how is Buckle? I have not heard anything since you said something. That was 3 weeks ago. So even Drew hasn't said anything, although I've been too tired to tune into Drew's show, so I miss a lot. The best model you could think of this as, these riots as, natural disaster other than an earthquake, a natural disaster that hopefully misses your house, combined with a serious human response towards violence. Um, I grew up in Reading. I've been through earthquakes. I was on the outskirts of the Loma Prieta earthquake. Um, so it's not like I'm unfamiliar with it or uncomfortable. I've been through tornado regions when there was an active tornado. Now, I didn't know about it until later because it didn't get close enough to me to do any kind of harm. And I've been through a flood event in the aftermath. I'm kind of familiar with these. I'm kind of comfortable. if you know it's going to turn into a riot because it's been declared already, get up and leave as soon as you can and go to that hotel an hour outside of town. Worst case scenario, I've always said this, you have to drive an extra hour to get to town or get to work. That's unfortunate. Luke is working, but he's listening in. Luke, you're working right now. You better be working on your house, boy. Don't piss Carrie off. Kick your ass. Oh, I mean, you'd better be working on your house or I will beat your ass. There we go. Without getting into too many details, an extra prayer for Luke. One of the riots from last summer, I think I heard somebody say that it was like a half a mile from his house. That's way, way too close. Hell, the nearest riot to my place, where I live, that is, was a half a mile away, and I could see the glow of some of the fires at night. It was earlier into the after sunset, but earlier into the night. I know I couldn't see anything by 2100, so they'd probably died down by then. Luke's a lot closer, folks, so say a prayer for him. Okay, moving on. How do I put this without writing the playbook? There will be shootings this time. It's as simple as that. And I'm saying this to every cop, even those sergeants that I hate so much, and I'm known for hating so much. Don't be afraid to hold a line, right? And I got to say this in a way that YouTube won't shut it down as soon as the words come out of my mouth. Don't be afraid to hold the line. And leave your tasers at home. Just leave them at home this time. Don't even bother. Pepper spray, maybe. The big riot canisters of pepper spray, maybe. Everything else, you might as well just leave it at home. It's not going to do you any good. Yeah, it's as simple as that. I want to emphasize something. Nothing was going to stop this. All right. And a guilty or a not guilty verdict was not going to make it any better. This has nothing to do with justice. This has everything to do with vengeance. Right? And it's blind vengeance. This is literally tribalistic vengeance that most of you, the closest you've ever seen, is that scene from Lawrence of Arabia, where Lawrence has to kill one of the Bedouins to prevent a civil war within his little army, and it's somebody he had rescued. And that's unfortunately the way it really is. Okay. It's been 20 minutes now. I've beat on this subject hopefully enough. Um, get ready for a long, hot summer. And that's the way it is. All right. On to subject number 2. Universal time. This is going to be a short one. Universal time was a concept proposed by Dr. Alan Renfro. For those of you that have been following me for a while, you know I'm a Renfroist. That would have put the entire world into basically one time zone. Right here and now, for me, this is 0920. Greenwich Mean Time, or Greenwich, Maine, it is 1720. Right across the English Channel, I believe it is 1920 in Paris. And if you can correct me on that, go ahead. That causes a lot of confusion and consternation. Now, Dr. Renfro actually predicted something like live streaming. The internet was not a thing by the time he wrote his his, uh, chapter or partial chapter on that subject. He thought it would be five people sitting in a studio. Um, he did say subject matter experts, uh, five subject matter experts debating the issue in a studio, and that they would be getting telegrams and phone calls, and then somebody would curate. First time I'd ever heard the word curate the questions and reformat into a way that they could answer. Give it to them. For example, according to YouTube, I have four people watching right now. So all four of you ask a version of the, the what is the best stitch for a holster. Well, my curator and my curators rather be taking these questions down. They'd pass it up. Somebody would take them, reformat into generalized question on sewing uh, holsters, and then me and my four co-hosts would debate the subject. That was his idea. By the last printing, the internet did exist, but nothing like we have today. Um, so that kind of made a different problem. Scheduling this. It's 0922 my time. People are going to tune in at 0900 their time. Hold up. What happens then? You live in Paris, France. I'm in Reno, Nevada. You're going to be what, 12, I think, 10 hours rather late. You're not going to get your question in. That's not going to happen. Thank you, Alpine. Um, the idea is put everybody into one time so that everybody would be actually 17, 22, 23 now, and just according to time zones. I would be going to work at midnight. I would show up at midnight, half past midnight every morning, start my workday. That's also part of the reason it fell apart. That concept fell apart because nobody wanted to adjust their own thinking to the new time zone issue. Well, that also proved to be a problem, and if you know the story of the Bay of Pigs, you can see one of the problems. The Air Force was operating out of one time zone, the battle was operating in a different time zone, and they failed to adjust accordingly. There's a lot of conspiracy theories about why, and maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong. I don't care. But either way, the promised air support arrived 2 hours late and an hour and a half after it was over. Okay, catching up on chat. Troll says the left treats reality like a plot hole. Yeah, kind of. Alpine says the best stitch for a holster is a cross stitch. And Troll says, oh, I put 20 Ozark beauty straws in my fish bucket. Excuse me, Ozark Beauty Strawberry in my fish bucket. Well, that should be good for oxygenating the water too. I admit I don't know quite as much about agriculture as possibly anybody in here. Uh, I planted a live tree once and it died a week later. It was a Christmas tree. It was still in the pot. It died a week later. So it was obviously after Christmas. So yeah, trust Troll. He knows what he's talking about, and I obviously don't. All right. The advantages of universal time is we would all know what time somebody sets something. Uh, Dr. Renfro never offered any alternative plan, and so it fell apart. I think that's the real reason nobody took him seriously. Is his time frame, his proposals just on time. It was just like, no, we don't want to deal with this, and ignored everything he would say after that. It is what it is. But I would encourage everybody to get a clock that has Greenwich Mean Time on it, or at least learn what your adjustment is, and go from there. Uh, for me, the adjustment is 8. See, I don't even know my own adjustment. I can't really hold that against y'all too much. 8 hours. I am 8 hours off. I am 8 hours behind Greenwich Mean Time. Go from there. And when you know you're working across time zones, like a couple of people that I talked to in the past, adjust accordingly. Okay, Troll says it's his first aquaponics system, so it's all new to him. Not as new to you as it is to me. Just saying. Today's been a rough day, and I don't want to get into that too much, but I've had a long day already. Okay. Universal time works across all time zones the exact same way. You don't take anything else from this little rambling rant. Please take that. All right, the next subject is Saadiq TEAGUE. Saadiq TEAGUE had what was described as an AK-47 with magazines, quote, within reach. Hold on to that thought, but not in the weapon. And nobody has described the mags as being loaded. That has not happened to the best of my knowledge yet. His story is he was visiting New York and he had the gun and he wanted to show it to somebody. Okay. Um, he was arrested. First of all, I want to put a whole lot on somebody. I don't know who yet, but the story has come down assault rifle. Okay. Well, somebody's got a lot of explaining to do because every single party with more than 2 brain cells to rub together has described an assault rifle as a long arm with at least an automatic or burst fire capability. I don't even own an assault rifle. I've never owned one. And I've only fired one twice, 3 times in my life, all of them when I was in the military. That's it. So unless he had an illegally converted one, because he claims he purchased it legally in his home state, unless he illegally converted it or something else, or he had a class 3 permit, class 7 permit, and legally converted it, he didn't have an assault rifle, right? Now there's a flag on the play, and it's a yellow flag, not a red flag. Um, a month earlier, there had been some drama involving him, and now he's involving his father had been killed a month earlier in New York by New York police. And now he's in New York with this kind of weapon. There's a possibility that maybe he should have rethought his plan. All other things being equal, he'd intended to just go up there and kill a bunch of cops. They wouldn't have known anything until the shooting started. That's the reality of the world. I'm not buying this story. First of all, he was committing any crime at all yet. The mags were empty. They weren't in the gun. Why is he going to go up there carrying the gun around with empty mags and an empty gun with the intention of doing a mass shooting? Like, you pick a story. Or don't. I don't care. I'm not buying this story, and I'm sticking to my original belief that this was, unfortunately, it might be an arrest legal by New York law, but it would be illegal even by California law. Simple as that. Um, Also brings to mind the case of Shanine Taylor. Now, for those of you that need your present memory refreshed, this is the lady who was driving along the freeway, the interstate, going from, I think it was Virginia where she lived, to Vermont, where she had some reason to be, through New Jersey. She had a concealed carry permit from her home state. She was stopped on the freeway. She has the gun with her, yes. Okay, so what? She has her concealed carry permit with her. Again, so what? She was arrested. Oh, really? For what? For having a concealed weapon on her in New Jersey. The case got to be so bad. This thing went on for like 2 years. She didn't do anything that was actually illegal. She was on federal property where her permit was. Uh, the federal government recognizes state concealed permits. She's on federal property that's maintained by the state, and she was arrested for having a concealed weapon in New Jersey. Well, seems legit. It's worse. It took her at least a year and a half to get her case resolved. And it only finally got resolved because the governor of New Jersey, Chris Christie, personally stepped in and said, "This thing is over, send her home." Even with everything else, the state of New Jersey was not going to let her go. What? This is one of the dangers of every state being allowed to make their own little special rules about what is what. And that was one of the first things I addressed when I finally got really serious about addressing Dataslov. Most people don't realize the original rough draft of Dataslov was literally a copy and paste of the Kennesaw ordinance that 20 minutes later I had made into the national law. Flash forward, I think 2 months, and I realized, this doesn't go far enough. I'm going to have to start all over again. And I did. That was one of the first things I addressed. The states cannot make their own special little rules about what is allowed and what is not. And I know I was thinking about her in particular as I wrote that section. I was also thinking about what was going on in Massachusetts, which was a law, an injunction lawsuit But I was thinking of her in particular as I wrote this and said, no, no, no. The states can't make up their own little rules. That's not going to happen. It is very easy for one state to make one rule, wait for somebody to cross state lines, enforce this little rule, and have them in jail for basically 2 years. It's actually not something without precedent. Washington State has a big, big problem in this department. Somebody I knew growing up, um, he's an adult as I'm growing up. He was going through Washington State. Um, he's driving alone through. I think he said Seattle. He misses his off ramp, gets off at the next off ramp, comes around and goes back down and gets pulled over and cited because in Washington State, those those sections of freeway are what the hell's it called? Well, basically, they're diamond lanes. He was cited for violating a diamond lane on a free interstate because he happened to be in Washington State. Wait, what's to stop California from passing a law? Because I lived in Sacramento at the time. What's to stop California from passing a law that says you can't drive through California in a vehicle that doesn't have California registration, I think was what I said at the time. Oh, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Now, unfortunately, Mike didn't fight the case. He really should have. But it is what it is. Now something much more serious is coming along. People are going to prison, sometimes facing 20 years, or doing something that they can't really avoid always crossing state lines with. Janine Allen, excuse me, not Taylor. Now what? Under Dadislav, he would not only not be citable, he wouldn't be in trouble, but the state of New York would actually basically have to repeal over 100 laws on this subject. So that's one standard for everybody. And the only thing the states get to hold on to is their how they write their concealed carry permit system. And even then, I'm actually waiting for New York, California, or Hawaii to create the problem so that I can go testify myself and say, no, Your Honor, that is not a reasonable requirement. I'll tell you the truth, I hope it's Hawaii because they have the worst gun laws of the entire 58. On a related note, Troll says, well, it seems states can make individual laws in places, municipalities as well. We allow right turn on red. South Carolina does not. Do not forget that. I was not aware of South Carolina's prohibition for a right turn on red. But in particular, states can make individual laws in places, municipalities as well. No. Under Dadislav, the only thing that the municipalities have is an option at the state legislature's pleasure to be the processing agency for concealed carry permits. That's it. Nothing else. San Francisco says no guns inside of city limits. Well, guess what? No, that's not the way it's going to be. And for those of you that are not aware, um, my late partner, Brent, he was a Washington State prison guard. Yep, I went there. I'm talking about it now. He was also a big 2A advocate. Um, he took time off of work. This is 2005, six, somewhere around there, early to mid 2000s. Um, he went down to California because he's from California originally to join a gun control protest. He took his weapon with him. He took it with him, and he had open carry. It was an open carry rally, and San Francisco cops took it. It gets much, much better. I know Brent well enough to know when he's pulling a scam, and he was kind of pulling a scam today. He allowed them to take it. Doesn't say anything. They took the gun. He waits. Well, he gets back. He says, "They took my gun. Who was the officer that took it? I don't know." Blah blah blah. He made sure that the whole thing was stalled for a month, by which time his gun was destroyed. It happens, right? Not exactly. If San Francisco Police Department had done even a basic serial number trace on the weapon, they would have known that it belonged to the state of Washington. Ooh, they destroyed a cop's gun. They destroyed a prison gun. Oh, that's gonna smart, isn't it? And rather than own up and say, "Oh yeah, we made a mistake," they said, "Yeah, okay, well, I think it was $300 for a Glock, $300, and just go away and don't bother us anymore. Don't even own up to the fact that they made a mistake. No, we're just going to give you the money and hope you go away," which they did. State of Washington did. Brent stayed on the rolls as one of the co-plaintiffs in the lawsuit to basically bankrupt San Francisco's was his plan. And about 6 to 8 months later is when California banned open carry outright. Rather than just own up and say, "Yeah, we screwed up and this happens," they blamed the victim, the actual victim of the crime. Um, I know Brent well enough to know that he maliciously refused to tell them that he was a cop. He wanted them to take the gun. He wanted them to be embarrassed because it would make for great press. Oh, cop takes cop's gun. That looks good on paper, doesn't it? Fortunately, that case was dismissed. So, Troll says South Carolina troopers are all about ticketing for right turn on red. Yeah, and I guarantee you, 100% of those tickets are out of state plates. I can't do anything about that. This is not mandatory drive channel. Although there are some other things, you'll see them later on, that Datasolve does cover under this subject. I'm just saying. Um, Mr. Teague's case underscores just how dangerous every state being allowed to write their own little rules really is. He's looking at some really potentially serious prison time and defamation because supposedly he had an assault rifle, which is a violation of federal law. Now, I went on a rant about that last week before they shut the stream down of reporters saying whatever they want. And I'm sticking by that, even though it's been deleted. We have got to stop letting everybody write their own little rule. All right. It's as simple as that. Excuse me, Alpine Gulch says MD channel law, mandatory drive channel. Yeah, no, I don't think I would do that. Um, excuse me. In fact, I wouldn't even start a mandatory driver's license concept. Closest you'll get me to come is, if you have a legitimate proposal, mandatory speech law. Show me your proposal. I'll hear it out. I know the guy that tried to use that as a shit post against me. Uh, never, yeah, he never got it to me. So I don't know what his idea would be. He never got it to me because it was intended as a shit post all along. Okay, whatever, boomer. And I know he sits in the chat or in the channel, um, lurking, looking for something he can report. But that's okay. If you ever do, League, if you ever do get that proposal written, send it to me. You know how to reach me. It's not that hard. Um, I'll hear it out. Unlike you, I will actually hear it out. Just saying. Moving on. Yeah, we've got to stop letting the states write their own little rules on everything, especially something that by definition will cross state lines. Um, that's also the reason for the Raggle Fraggle exemption that allows you to cross state lines with your weapons only, and I'll go over that in a lot more detail later on to stop these same kinds of problems. Right. If you have any questions about this subject, drop them in the chat or in comments afterwards. Okay, we're only not even to the halfway mark. And Title III definitions is not going to take a whole hour. As you all know by now, I'm bouncing around between different subjects. For the sake of anybody who might be arriving late, this summer there are going to be riots. Chauvin's conviction has nothing to do with his guilt or innocence. It's a railroad. It was just a railroading. Whether it was the jury being terrified and intimidated into voting guilty no matter what, which is very popular opinion, one I subscribe to myself, or whether it was they looked at the evidence and they really did think, yeah, he's guilty of intentional and unintentional murder at the same time. Wait, what? That doesn't even make sense. But hey, whatever. Of deliberately and accidentally killing the guy at the same time. Okay. Um, he was going to be found guilty. It was as simple as that. The best case scenario was that the jury officially finds him guilty. Yes, you did this thing. You're going to have to go to prison, and that's the end of it. Okay. The judge dismisses the jury and says, thank you for your service. You may leave. You're dismissed. Go home. Waits until they walk outside and says, okay, yeah, right, about that. I'm dismissing the jury verdict because it was a bad verdict. There's actually a precedent in the inverse that a judge can't reverse. It's called jury nullification. Jury says, yeah, we know you're guilty. We know you did it. And we are not going to convict you because we know we supported your actions. No matter how illegal it was, go home, don't worry about it. And that's actually illegal. It was very, very commonly used in the South with all white juries against black defendants, no matter, uh, excuse me, all white juries against white defendants accused of crimes against blacks, be it something as simple as murder or something as bad as murder or rape, or something as simple as, cheating him out of $5. That was a common thing until federal law said, yep, no, no more jury nullification. For those of you that are about to say, oh, but my state doesn't ban it, you may be right. That's federal law, not state law. Jury nullification, and states that ban it tend to actually be the southern states where these abuses were so common. I'm just saying. The only state I know of that can actually charge the members of the jury nullification is one of the southern states. I want to say it's Alabama or Louisiana. And I don't actually know what the penalty is. I don't know, misdemeanor, felony, infraction, something else. But there's one state that you can actually be in trouble for that. I'm just saying. The best we could have hoped for, getting back on topic, is that the judge nullified the jury verdict. And judges actually do have that authority. It was a bad jury verdict, not based on the realities of the case. That's also a reaction. That was also a common thing with black defendants accused of crimes against whites. Boo Radley, for those of you that know that reference, would probably, with a fair and honest judge, would probably have gotten a judicial dismissal, I think that's the proper term, and told, go home and don't talk to that girl anymore. Don't help her out. Don't go anywhere near that girl. Stay away from her. That's it. Alpine Gulch is very correctly, uh, very appropriately correcting me. And jury nullification was used a lot in crimes against Indians. This is not a politically correct channel. And she's right. In fact, that was the absolute, even after the federal law came along. If you were an Indian and you were accused of a crime against a white man, you were guilty, even up until the 90s. That's the truth. Not every case, but yeah, a lot of cases, well, many cases into the 90s, you were guilty and that was it. In the 80s, it wasn't as bad as the 90s. In the 70s, it wasn't quite as bad as the 90s, but it was pretty bad. In the 60s, it was bad. In the 50s, it was bad. And in the 40s, you might as well not even bother asking for a trial. Um, and the inverse is true. A white man accused of a crime against an Indian, he was basically going to go home, unless it was a um, hanging offense. Sometimes rapes, the jury would actually sit down and listen to the evidence. Other than those, yeah, no, the white guy's innocent, send him home. The Indian's guilty, hang him. And that's really the way it was. You notice I very often do not say anything about what's right, wrong, or indifferent, right? Fair and unfair has nothing to do with it. That was just the reality of the world back then. Because the judge in the Chauvin case didn't invoke that power, Um, chances of it happening now are basically non-existent. It's not going to happen. The best that he can hope for is another judge up up the chain is going to go back and look at this case and just basically dismiss the charges. Might dismiss the charges after an actual hearing of the case. He's he's going to dismiss the charges and say go home. And the other issue against him involving the IRS is going to be resolved rather quickly. The IRS has him on failure to file tax returns, not failure to pay income tax, just failure to file. A lot of people do that. And if you don't owe them money, or the paper says you don't owe them money, they just tell you don't do it again. I may be mistaken, but I believe there's actually a fine that they can do. But if they did that with everybody, they'd be making money too fast to count it. And it's entirely plausible that they owe him money. That's the norm. They're just not going to pay him. And you know what? If you didn't file your income tax and you don't get your return, it's kind of on you. Sorry, but that's the reality of the world. Not that it's necessarily fair, it's the reality. What else can I say about this subject at this point? Um, um, all right, I don't have it now and I don't want to dig it up. As early as the day before the verdict, Tim Pool, of all people, said, "Get home now." That actually happened. The link is in the description. Go ahead and test me on this. Tim Pool started out reporting on the same people who are now BLM and lauding them as some sort of great patriots, blah, blah, blah. And now even he's starting to see this is not okay. None of this is okay. You gotta ask yourself, how bad has it really gotten that their basically first defender has said, no, you people are out of control. And he still makes excuses for a lot of what they do. I got that. Um, if he's saying get home now, what's that got to tell? That's got to tell you something. Gulch says it's the school of law, not the school of justice. Laws are not always written in a just fashion, especially the really, really complicated ones like tax laws and contract laws. And any judge will tell you sometimes it's not about what's fair, it's what's legal. Any competent attorney will will very often tell you it's not always about what's fair, it's what's legal. And every single cop will tell you it's never about what's fair, it's about what's legal. When it comes to questions of law, cops tend to be the most honest because they have to deal with the consequences. Back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, when we didn't have domestic violence laws like we do now, sometimes they just take the guy down to the jail and say, you can sleep it off here tonight. Totally illegal, right? Oh, or, go to a hotel and, oh, yeah, by the way, if we see you here again tonight, or if we get another call here, you're going to jail and that's it. And they totally illegal. And they'd get away with it each and every time because they didn't have a way to deal with it. World changed. Sometimes, even now, it's not actually always fair, it's legal. Um, I could testify on this subject for an hour. I'm not going to. This is not the domestic violence channel. We are now at just over the halfway mark. Got a notification of something, so let's take a look. Wow, it must not have been that damn important. Wasn't that damn important? Wrong screen. Um, excuse me. So yeah, lock your doors, get ready for the summer, get fire extinguishers, and be ready for water to be potentially shut off. If you live in a house and your water is shut off and the fires are coming, you're in a bad position to be in. There's ways of addressing that that I will not discuss on an open circuit like this. Um, you need to be ready for this summer because it's going to be bad. It's going to be the worst summer literally in U.S. history. Um, how do I put this? The Civil War, the Revolutionary War, the reprisals and massacres of that period are going to be nothing compared to what happens this summer. That's the way it is. Hopefully, a few of these shenanigans will blow up in Antifa's. I mean, not an accident. Blow up in Antifa's face, like Tennessee did. We'll see. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I got to turn the camera off for a second. Sorry about that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put up Title 3 as soon as I find it again, because unfortunately I did something else for the stream. Title 3, a second to come up. Windows. No, wait. My computer is giving me shit. It does not want to bring up the image. There we go. That's so much better. Make sure it's actually sharing this time. Excellent. Okay. Title 3 definitions. General definitions. Now I'm going to, this is a big long list, and I'm going to go into them. I'm going to split them up next week and the week after to go over them in more detail. Firearms, pistols and handguns, long arm, shotgun, assault weapon, machine gun, rotary cannon, autocannon, rotary cannon, all other weapons, body armor, other protective gear, personal protective equipment, handheld, armor penetrator, suppressor, or silencer. Magazine. Any item listed here is included under the protections of this act, including restrictions on states' ability to regulate same. Does that sound familiar? This in no way restricts protections to future types of weapons not listed here. Oh, okay. The federal government may require enhanced licensing for the ownership of assault weapons and machine guns, limited to a background check and recording of owner's name, home address, weapons make, model, stored location address, serial number, itemized modifications, and stored location and weapons subject to not more than 3 inspections per year. Federal government is only authorized to charge for processing to actual cost of government based on an average cost of the previous 5-year period, with said costs declared publicly in all possible formats. The states, counties, and cities are forbidden to require or ban the use of any PPE. Mandatory use of PPE not related to the nature of employment can only be imposed by the federal government on a two-thirds majority vote of both houses, and not for a period of more than 6 months per vote. Employers and other private parties are forbidden to require or ban any PPE under any circumstance. This section does not include the requirement to bear arms. Okay, so I put that there. Good. All right, so we're going to skip past the big long list of definitions for now. What this actually specifically delineates is, first of all, what are these definitions? What's an assault weapon? What's a handgun? My handgun can be converted to an assault weapon. All right, and there's a kit out. I actually had one, but it got stolen. Lucky me. Anyway, what can the federal government allow? What can they restrict? They can't ban anything, but they can restrict 3 things: automatic weapons, continuous feed weapons, and explosive and incendiary rounds. That's it. Everything else, all semi-automatic, anything, doesn't matter what it is, you can have it. You could actually theoretically have an RPG-7 as long as you don't have the explosive or incendiary or gas rockets. Do you know how common training rounds for RPGs are? I don't, but I do know that I think it was Sum of All Fears. No, it was not Sum of All Fears. Another novel about the Afghan Civil War. They were so common that one guy actually figured out a way to use them as a weapon. He'd shoot that at a training round at a Russian helicopter. Russian helicopter would open fire on the training rounds position. Boom, he's got you. The only thing that the feds can do for what we currently call Class 3 is record your name, your home address, where you store the weapon, if it's not your home address, which very often is, and they can inspect the facilities up to 3 times per year. Go through everything and find, do you have anything you're supposed to have that you don't actually have? Are they stored properly? Blah, blah, blah. That's it. I'm particularly pleased with myself. This in no way restricts protections to future types of weapons not listed here. There we go. I'm particularly proud of that because I've known for at least 5 years that sooner or later, James Kirk's phaser is going to happen. I'm actually right now kind of surprised it hasn't, because there is one out there and it's about the size of a handgun, right? that can boil water from a distance of 6 feet through a metal pan. Oh, that's very interesting. That's a lot of power. That's enough potentially to kill a human, and it's portable. That's very, very impressive. Sooner or later, our chemically driven firearms are just simply going to become obsolete as bow and arrows on the battlefield today. Yes, I said as obsolete as bow and arrows on the battlefield today, and I meant that exactly the way it sounds. Now, for those of you who are Star Wars fans, you'll know that slug throwers are still popular a million years ago, long, long ago in a galaxy far, far away, long after something else came into uh, became the popular weapon, which I can go over that in a minute. Sooner or later, slug throwers are going to become obsolete. This leaves wide open the opportunity for just about anything to eventually be developed and remain protected. That's the way it is. Now, will the uh, I'm going to go over this very, very briefly, and I'm not entertaining questions on this subject right now. Under Datislav, assault weapon is defined as detachable magazine fed and automatic and or burst fire compatible. That's an assault weapon. Semi-auto only is not included. Machine gun is continuous feed capable. That's it. Okay, so hypothetically speaking, James Kirk develops, or somebody develops the laser gun. It's not a gun under US law right now. One of the defining characteristics when I first wrote it was tubular uh, barrel. Well, okay, what if James Kirk's phaser doesn't use a tubular barrel? What if it's a solid piece of square bar stock? Well, it's not a firearm under federal law, is it? It's not protected, or it's not covered. Or the framers of the Constitution never oh, envisioned that. Or whatever else other excuse you're going to come up with, coming and going, to justify it. Like on the play. I've seen people use really, really questionable arguments on both sides like this. There was a guy, I think it was out of California, who actually got his conviction for firearms manufactured illegally under federal law dismissed because the barrel did not thread to the upper receiver, first of all. And second of all, it attached to the upper receiver, not the lower receiver, which is considered the gun under federal law. So he got it dismissed on two crazy technicalities. Even by my standards, these are crazy. Okay. On the flip side was the Massachusetts ban on pepper spray. All right. For anything with any kind of range, pepper spray is the lowest possible force. They banned pepper spray because it was not something that the framers of the Constitution had ever envisioned as being. Now that's bullshit. But let's worry about the bullshit later. Right here and now, let's talk about what could we do to prevent both scenarios from happening. Well, the first thing is I open a door that says anything that in the future is possible. And second of all, I close the door that says, and oh yeah, by the way, these are the limits of the definition. I took tubular out of the barrel out of the definition, but future development is also included. Now, folks, I'm a little confused here. So can somebody drop an F in chat for me? Because I'm not sure if I'm still live or not. Either way, everything is now protected in the future, even if it doesn't meet those other definitions that have not much to do with anything. The two kids, I believe it was, and this was actually something that I found. I had to show it to Brent because he didn't think it was really possible. Thank you, Foss. Um, about 4 years ago, they came up with a gauze rifle. Now, how utile is this gauze rifle in the real world? I don't know. Gauze rifle, or whatever else you want to call it, is an electromagnetic based system. Electromagnets pull a piece of metal down in a particular direction and then sends it out that direction at an extremely high velocity. The US Navy is actually experimenting with the use of gauze systems for aircraft catapults. I'm just saying that tubular thing's starting to come back again, isn't it? But either way, um, that wouldn't have met the definition of a firearm under federal law. Now it's either not covered, can't be illegal because it was never mentioned, or it doesn't meet the definition, or it's not protected because that didn't exist in their time. Give me a break. Both of you give me a break. And yes, as Foss points out, railguns are awesome. A powerful enough uh, railgun can take out a tank. Powerful enough railgun to take out a tank is also a little bit bigger. The basic system is a little bit bigger than a current artillery piece, plus the support equipment is about the size of a mobile home. No, excuse me, a RV. So it's more of a support weapon system, but he's right. They are very, very impressive. The Navy is actually was experimenting with railguns as weapon systems in and of themselves. Those still use tubular barrels. They're experimenting with gauze systems for catapults, which by definition can't be tubular. And they are actually putting planes in the air with that. The real question is the power ratio versus the use of steam, and is the amount of power that they're going to have to use to put these planes in the air going to be equal to or greater than or less than how much space and power it takes to run the steam-based systems that had existed before that? I don't know. That's outside my purview. But these two kids built a rail gun in their garage, and they shot a laptop up. A laptop is not quite as hard as a human body, but it's probably harder than human skin. So did they totally blow up the entire model right then and there? I don't know. Got it in a different place. Now, folks, I'm sorry about whatever happened with the I'm sorry about whatever happened with the uh, screenshot I had. It is what it is. It also very specifically protects body armor. Flag on the play. In theory alone, you could walk around with nothing but body armor on all day and meet the barest definition of mandatory carry. I'm telling y'all now, the moment I hear the first case of somebody who is cited for mandatory carry and says, well, no, Your Honor, my ticket should be dismissed because I was wearing body armor at the time, I want to be on the plane the same day. That is a bullshit defense at every level. So theoretically, you could make the argument. I really do want to be there to testify. No, Your Honor, this is not the intentions of this law. Um, I will be going over this probably next week, but it also puts a restriction on PPE. Now, this is at, and I'm just saying this the way it really is. This is a response to flagrant and abusive uh, use of mask mandates for this last year. All right, I cannot go into Costco. I cannot, and I really do not want to wear a mask. I don't want to wear it for a short period of time, and I can't wear it for more than about 30 minutes at a time. So I avoid places where masks are required to go in. It is as simple as that. I can't always avoid going to Costco. Costco, rather than make a big issue about it, they give you a face mask. Are you fucking kidding me? I actually have one. I want to put a red A in the lower right corner and walk around with that on. Unfortunately, the only place I use it is one particular Costco, and that would get Papa Carey. That would tell the whole world who Papa Carey is, and I don't want to cause him that kind of trouble. I thought about it. I really did. When I first said it, that was like, that's funny. Um, I am kind of open to negotiation on who can impose these mandates, but not for how long and not under what conditions. Right. What's that all about? I said federal. Uh, there's a couple of people who say, well, wait a minute. What if the governor of such and such a state has a real problem? The governor in the next state doesn't have that problem. Okay. I'm willing to negotiate about which levels would be allowed what, but timeframes are not going to, I'm not even considering budging on timeframes at the federal level, and I would only consider budging on timeframes state level, or budging on authority at the state level based on budging on timeframes. And that's it. That that was the fight. That's the hill I chose to die on. Um, I'm going to say something else here, and this is going to get me in trouble, and I give a fuck. I'm always in trouble anyway. What the fuck? Um, 14 days to flatten the curve. First of all, when they first said that, I knew, okay, we're talking about 2 months. And second of all, I didn't expect them to flatten the curve so much as to figure out what they were going to do. I was giving them 2 months to figure out a plan, shut everything down for a couple months, and then we'll talk about and spend that time figuring out how they were actually going to deal with this problem long term. It's a year later. We still have mask mandates. They've been declared illegal, and we still have people getting in trouble for it. Up in Canada, I don't even need to talk about what's going on because it's gotten to be so bad that they almost had to evacuate Rob Ford and a Huey like a scene out of The Fall of Saigon. When Canadians are mad enough to fight, you done fucked it up. It's as simple as that. And Canadians were ready to fight. it was that ridiculous. There's still a chapel that's been closed with fencing and private security by the state or by the province. The mandates were issued up in Ontario, Canada. When I say Canadians were ready to fight, I mean that police, at least some of them, were saying, we're not going to enforce this. That's pretty strong language. And they said it. You really fucked up, bro. Just saying. So yeah, that whole section is about what they can and cannot do and under what circumstances. Everything else, and there's actually a section in there, although it doesn't appear here, addressing home builds. In reference to home builds, they can't do anything. Okay, so that puts me in the right position now to talk about the ATF's 80% ban proposals. Now, I don't know how much of this is real and how much of it is exaggeration or misunderstanding. But a document was leaked from the ATF going over the subject of bans on 80%. Okay, well, this was what was said to me by an ATF agent back around 2003-ish. Um, if you build it at home, how are we ever going to know? There's literally only one way they'll ever know, and that's you used it somehow. As a general rule, cops don't actually check the provenance of a firearm if you're not being charged with something, right? If I'm not being charged with murder or being arrested for murder, they're not going to run the serial number on my guns. There's just no point. When I go to Papa Carey's, if I found myself in a situation where I do have to use my weapon because I don't have a California concealed carry permit, I could have I could be charged with unlawful possession of a firearm. It generally doesn't happen if I'm not actually being looked at for something else. I'm just saying that's the reality. But it also is, oh, it is something that they could do. Even if I'm being charged with unlawful possession after having done everything else right and perfect, they usually don't run the serial numbers. It's just not worth the trouble. They have to have a reason to want, they have to have a reason to think of it. And if they're not mad at me for what I actually did, they're not going to look any deeper than that. They don't, it's not worth the trouble. An extra 5 years in prison, and he's going to plead out from that anyway. Not worth the trouble. How is the ATF now going to enforce their 80% ban? From what I've been hearing, what they're actually going to do is take all of the 80% producers and say, now you're in trouble. And they've done this before. There was somebody producing an 80% parts kit that sold them, and they actually said in the big words, "Hey, this, we're not sure if this is legal yet, so you're buying at your own risk." Okay, and then the ATF said, "Yep, that's not legal." Hey, totes, sorry. Um, let's talk about something even simpler. How about a 1% or 0%? Really, I know there's a couple people that vaguely follow my channel that are those 0%, well, lower receiver types, what are you going to do with them, Mr. ATF man? Are you literally going to sit in their house and watch everything they do? Plug on and play. Uh, I don't know how to use it. Unfortunately, Fix doesn't know how to use it. But when he passed away, Brent had a complete CNC machine. He could make literally any to some degree, up to and including my old Beretta. Yeah, that's what I just said. He could also make my old Smith & Wesson 4006, which he did. That was actually his gift to me when I switched sides, when I fully switched sides, right? Now, my 4006 unfortunately disappeared into divorce along with my Beretta. That happened. How is Mr. ATF man ever going to trace those two? How I can't even trace those two. I could never prove that Brent made them. And I know a couple of his dirtier tricks. Now what? If you couldn't even uh, trace these 80%, how are you going to trace the zeros? Um, there was something that I always thought was just a shit post. Some guy built an AR-15 low receiver out of pine. That's my understanding. Is it was made out of pine. How are you going to trace that? How are you going to trace a home built barrel? You know, like Brent used to trick me into understanding how bad gun control fails. He still, Vic's bayonet still has that barrel somewhere, buried in a box, I guess. But anyway, it's still around. How are they going to trace any of this if they couldn't trace something as simple as an 80? They're going to go over all of the records for the 80% lower sales companies. Okay. Well, besides the violations on Fourth and Fifth Amendment, because nothing they did was illegal, so now they're violating the company's privacy, violating my Fifth Amendment right. How many doors is that going to kick open, and how quickly is it going to kick them open? But let's never mind that. How are you going to stop me from making for myself? For those of you that have gone through the channel and sat through an hour-long, basically lecture, there's a video called Gun Control Has Failed. It's a splicing of 5 videos on the subject, one of which was very pointed in its message. You can make an 80% lower receiver. Now, this one was a little bit lower quality than I would have preferred. It wasn't as pretty, right? There was a lot of things he could have done to make it a little bit better, not that much. And I'm not talking about painting it. Now, what? Oh, and by the way, his machine was not CNC, all right? It did have digital control system, something that I don't fully understand, but it was not a CNC machine. It was still manually activated, still manually run. Gonna catch up on chat. Total Control 871 says the Ohio shooting was 100% legit. The psycho teen was going for the jugular. Okay. I was not going to address that, but I will since we're in related territory. For those of you that just found out this morning or late last night, like myself, there was a shooting of a black teenage girl. 3 incendiary um, identifications, right? Underage, black, and female. It was, as far as I know, a lethal shooting. It was a white cop. Uh-oh, that's going to make it worse, right? Why am I sitting back and relaxing? Well, it's because LeBron James shot his fucking mouth off. Oh, yes. Yeah, that's exactly what happened. Everybody's all incensed. Oh, this white cop, he murdered another young teenage black and a girl at that. LeBron James, I will not repeat what he said, but it was so far over the top that I'm sitting here shocked that he's not in cuffs himself over what he said. Because within 12 hours, which is why I didn't hear about it until last night, the whole story came out. This 16-year-old girl pulled a knife and tried to stab another 16-year-old girl. Oh, my. I wonder why the cop shot her. Yeah, she was trying to murder somebody right there in front of him. And before you go autistically reading about, oh, he could have de-escalated certain situation. No, she was gone. She was not here anymore. Oh, he could have used a lot lesser level of force. Well, he couldn't use pepper spray because her back was to him. Couldn't use mace because her back was to him. He would have ended up spraying the victim to be of the stabbing. So that's not going to make the situation any better. And worse still, pepper spray and mace are proven to not work 100% of the time. Now, firearms are not proven to work 100% of the time either. Scary statistic, even with police, a shooting is only deadly about 50% of the time. But okay, now maybe cops need better guns. Did I just say that out loud? Yes, I did. But it gets worse. Um, we have no way of knowing if this girl who did get shot was resistant to CSC on OC. We have no idea of how resistant, because I'm resistant to OC. I've been pepper sprayed. I was able to keep fighting for another, I think it was 2 minutes. Now, after that 2-minute fight for life was done, I was literally trying to drown myself in fresh water to get that crap out of my eyes. But I was able to keep fighting for those 2 minutes. 2 minutes is a long time when you're stabbing somebody. And I know this personally. Log on the play. I was sprayed with pepper spray because that was Coast Guard regulations. You had to be sprayed before you could carry. And then you had to fight a, a simulated attacker. It was, in my case, a BM2, I think it was, GM2, excuse me, holding an ass bag. And I had to fight him off for 2 minutes with the baton. And the instructor has to clearly hear you say, get off my partner twice, or get off of me. Get off of me twice before you pass. My second time, he didn't hear me. So I had to fight a little bit longer than the 2 minutes required because he never heard me say it the second time. I said it the time. I said, get off of me. And I hit him so hard that he backed up a couple feet. I didn't break his arms. That was somebody else. Whoever you are, God bless you. I'm been there, done that. I know how long that is. That's a long time. Okay, so the next shit post, he could have used a taser. Let's just move on. No, actually, let's go back to that. Let's assume he did try a taser. Did that stop her? Maybe, maybe not. And there are people who can fight through a taser. I'm not one of them. I know this from personal experience too. Um, I dropped like a bag of shit when I got tasered. The next one up, he could have grabbed his baton. Okay, well, first of all, she can keep fighting through the baton, maybe if she, especially if her mind is gone the way it was, or appears to have been. She could have fought through the baton, and he would have had to have hit her in the head to actually get her to stop. There are people who have kept fighting despite their various extremities being broken. Right? Compounded. I got a compound fracture in my hand because I kept fighting despite the fact that I had broken my hand. That hurt, and I kept fighting. That was not the CS time. That was an actual fight. Um. Okay. Now he breaks her arm, so she keeps fighting through the compound fracture. Would have had to have hit her in the head, and that will get you in trouble each and every time. Guaranteed. You hit somebody as a cop. You hit somebody in the head with a baton, you're in trouble, and that's it. You've got to actually go back and prove you were aiming for a different part of the body. They moved, and you hit them in the head. And it's not even a matter of right, wrong, or indifferent. It's at very best you will be fired, right, for hitting somebody in the head with a baton, whether you're in actual legal trouble or not. It's the question. Even in training, if you hit and I've gotten a little bit of that training too. You hit somebody in the head with a baton, you're in trouble. Deploying those weapons then becomes the second problem, right? He's got to reach across, get the baton out, reach across, grab the pepper spray, whatever, and be in a position to use them. That's a long time. The other girl is going to be dead in this amount of time. That's the way it is, or or permanently injured, dead or permanently injured. And then he's actually got to stop her with them. He went for his gun. He was right. The amazing part is, having reviewed as much of it as I have been able to, I'm really surprised that the girl who died did die. Right? I'm not going to get into this too deeply. There are conditions that improve or exacerbate your probability of being killed by a gunshot. He must have gotten one hell of a good shot in, one hell of a lucky shot in. All right, Toad said she was psycho. I don't know. But I do know that there's no way she didn't know that there was a cop standing right, or the cops were right there getting ready to do something. I have not seen the video. I've only seen two stills out of it, and one of them is a girl with the um oh, what the hell is her name? Kathy Griffin put out a tweet saying, "Have you never seen a knife fight in a high school before?" Well, you know what? Yeah, I saw a knife fight. Oh, I saw the effects of a knife fight in my high school. I was in a continuation school. This is where they send you if what they really want to do is expel you from the entire school system because you're perceived as being out of control. And there was a knife fight at my school. That's the only knife fight I've ever actually seen. Excuse me. Other than the time I got stabbed, this is the only knife fight I've ever seen. And that stabbing doesn't really count. It's just, he had the weapon to intimidate, not to actually kill. I don't think he understood what he was doing. It is what it is, and one of us actually did end up going to the hospital. Um, and Totes says the attacker was going for the jugular. I don't know what she was going for. But the fact that she pulled the knife out and actually tried to use it is a pretty bad sign. With the exception of I didn't have a gun. I've been where that cop was. I, I'm telling you all, I'm taking sides. Cop did everything perfect, or as perfect as the real world allows. He could have used lesser force. Actually, no, he couldn't have used lesser force unless he wanted two victims. Once the attacker was done killing her victim, what was she going to do next? Was she just going to drop the knife and say, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm such a horrible human being"? No, she was going to turn on the cop and maybe somebody else who was there. And now the cop's sitting there trying to tase her 50 times. Get real. So, yeah, the Ohio cop shouldn't even be running a desk right now. The fact that, or uh, uh, suspended pending an investigation, the investigation should be over by now, right? And he should actually be back on the streets. Do we pin a medal on him? No, not quite. But the investigation should be done by now. He didn't do anything wrong. Fuck you. Now, if you notice the title, I'm talking about Chauvin being railroaded, and I'm willing to go so far as that Chauvin did more wrong than the Ohio cop. Derek Chauvin had somebody with a drug overdose right there in his custody and didn't recognize it. Oh, oh dear. He didn't recognize a warning sign of a drug overdose. That's unfortunate. Maybe we could work on training or something that I can't even think of right now. Derek Chauvin was railroaded in the Ohio cop. He wasn't even railroaded. He was tied to the tracks and left there. Okay, coming up on the last 12 minutes. You got a question? Please ask. Um, because I'm just going to go over a quick reading of today's Dataslav section. Section 3, or Title 3 definition, Section 3 general definition, firearms, pistols and handguns, long arms, shotguns, assault weapons, machine guns, rotary, autocannons, rotary guns, all other weapons, body armor, other protective gear, personal protective equipment, handheld, armor penetrator, suppressor or silencer, magazine. Any items listed here is included under the protections of this act, including restrictions on states' ability to regulate same. This in no way restricts protection to future types of weapons not listed here. Federal government may require enhanced licensing for the ownership of assault weapons and machine guns, limited to a background check of and recording of owner's name, home address, weapons make, model, stored location address, serial number, itemized modifications, and stored location and stored location and weapons subject to not more than 3 inspections per year. The federal government is only authorized to charge for processing to actual cost of government based on average cost of the previous 5 years, with said costs declared publicly in all possible formats. The states, counties, and cities are forbidden to require or ban the use of any PPE. Mandatory use PPE not related to the nature of employment can only be imposed by the federal government on a two-thirds majority vote of both houses and not for a period of more than 6 months per vote. Employers and other private parties are forbidden to ban any PPE under any circumstances. This section does not include the requirement to bear arms. Okay, there it is. They can, the feds can authorize the use of PPE for not more than 6 months at a time. I'm willing to discuss the subject of um, the states separately. Total Control 871 says, we'll never know the truth about toxic screen. No, probably won't. We'll never know the whole truth at the very least. Pro-cop people will always cry OD, and BLM will always say murder, and that Chauvin is guilty. Well, he's guilty of not being psychic. And that's where I stand. I was never in Derek's position. I was in the Ohio cop's position. Yeah, and maybe Derek did. He's looking down on this and saying, what is going on here? Why is this guy acting like this? Do I have a 5150? Is this guy overdosing? And all of these things are going through your head pretty quick. Maybe there was a warning sign and he missed it. Maybe we need to talk about that. Maybe there was a warning sign and he caught it, but now he's got this guy who's just out of control, crowd that's out of control. There's nothing I can. I'm stuck here with this. I'm stuck here with this situation until I can get this crowd to go away so I can get the paramedics in to deal with this guy. And by the time it resolved to the point where he could do it, it was too late. And y'all just saw a touch of my PTSD come out just now, so I apologize. My own situation where I was facing the guy with the knife. I've got this, not crowd, this witness who's here, and I've got to deal with this problem. Now, I dealt with this problem by telling her to call the cops. Derek was the cops. What's he going to do? Never know the whole truth. We can never know the whole truth because the only person who can give us the other side of the story isn't going to give us any story ever. There you go. That's the truth. The only person who can give us the other side of the story in Ohio is never going to give us a story at all. Her would-be victim can give us a story. That's it. Okay, Totes says, knees don't belong on necks when the victim is cuffed. I'm very upset and concerned about that myself. And I know a little bit more about that than most people, and I'm very upset and concerned about that myself. Small of the back, which is where his knee was at various points, his knee on that neck that way very much bothers me. I'm not even gonna lie about that part. Sorry, MC, but you are guilty of the same reality warping that BLM and Antifa is a little bit, maybe. I'm very upset and concerned about Derek's knee on that neck. Not as upset and concerned as I am about the rest of the story. Flag on the play. I am a realist. I can sit here and look at the photo of Derek's knee on that neck, especially if I want to get into the details too deeply because I don't want to write somebody's playbook for them. Um, there's details about that that bother me. There's folks. Um, okay, where was it? There are some things about that that bother me. I predicted that Derek Chauvin would not be a cop by the end of summer. I'm not surprised to see that part is correct. But the reactions were completely disproportional. Okay. Right. Last few snide remarks or questions. Come out, wherever you are, League. I know you're there lurking. You probably just logged out and lurked. Anyway, if you live in a city that has had a riot over the summer, um, as Tim Pool put it, get home now. Lock your doors, barricade your doors, do whatever you can, and be ready to leave in about an hour's notice because you'll be lucky if that's enough notice. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up here. Keep calm and mandatory carry on.